everyone, and welcome to One Short Podcast, episode 369. My name's Benjamin Yoder. My cat fur's all over this microphone. Speaking of microphones, trying a different little microphone setup this week. My previous microphone setup was left over from like when I streamed a lot more, and so it was kind of a little annoying because it would always get on my face and stuff. So I'm trying to go back to the desk mic setup. We'll see how it goes. We'll see how it sounds. This is a different microphone technically, but it's the same brand. So the settings might be off, might sound a little weird. Bear with me this week, just because I didn't want to take this down and then be like, this doesn't work, and then have to remount this microphone back up here again. So anyways, we got news stories this week. We have a news story. Look, do you get flustered when I talk about crypto on this podcast? Well, guess what? We have a great story for you this week because it's about Bandai Namco. It's about them doing something that I don't know if it's stepping away from the crypto industry, but it might be a good sign of where things are going there. Also, Shift announced their new project at Summer Game Fest. We're going to talk about that a little bit. I got a VR headset. Finally, we'll get into that, how that happened, and all that stuff. And then I also want to talk a little bit about, this is driven by quite a few things kind of happening all at once. The idea of like sexually influenced games and like how to approach those. And not related, but you know, also somewhat of a sexual game experience. We're going to talk about Gal Guardians a little bit at the end of the show. And then this week, I promise, no matter what, we're going to talk about River City Underground. I know everyone's been waiting. Ben, where are your River City Underground opinions? And let me tell you, they're somewhere. So no matter how I feel at the end of the podcast this week, we're doing that. I did decide to make some changes to how I review games a little bit. You may not notice. Might be more of a me thing. So anyways, but there might be some slight changes to how I talk about these games, again, that you may not notice. So anyways, Bandai Namco. You know what Bandai Namco loves? Money. As many companies do. So yeah, Bandai Namco, they previously had formed this one group. We talked about it quite a while ago. I don't remember how long ago. But this, I believe it's the 021 fund. And what was interesting about this, or why we were looking at this back at the time, was Bandai Namco is basically saying we're putting money aside to build like metaverse and crypto, like NFT style game experiences, right? And that's, you know, something that we have talked about quite a bit over the years. But what's interesting recently is Automaton Media here. I'm actually not sure. Is it a press release? Yeah, a press release they covered by Amber, who previously was on Hot Pot Gaming. Go check out that episode. Basically, they're kind of I don't know if repurposing this fund is the right word, but they're maybe expanding it. So this money they're setting aside to work on these kind of like metaverse and crypto projects and things like this. It sounds like what they're basically saying is like, this is now going to be a general investment fund for video games as a whole. And so what that means is, I think the thing they said they're going to focus on is that they really want to kind of expand it to be more about developing new IP, as well as like establishing kind of just new entertainment business stuff in general. So now I think the way that most people have interpreted this, and I think even myself initially here, is this idea that, you know, Bandai Namco, instead of putting money towards, you know, crypto and metaverse stuff, which honestly, I don't really know too much about like what Bandai Namco has done in that space. Obviously the Gundam metaverse thing that everyone kind of poked fun at, which I don't really remember enough about it to say how much I either agree or disagree with how people, you know, approach that. But, you know, it's one of those things that like anytime people are ready to make fun of something without thinking about it, I'm already on edge there. And I felt like that was one of those situations where people were just going to make fun of it without really thinking about it. And you know, I think any of this like metaverse and crypto stuff is always like in that position where like nobody's really going to give it the time of day. So you have to really sit down and give it your own time of day if you want to understand what's actually happening here a lot of times. But anyways, point being is that it sounds like these are still parts of these funds. It's not that those parts of it are necessarily going away. It's just like the scope of these projects are going to be, or the scope of what this funding group covers will change. Now, I think where this could play a role, if you're like, I wish Bandai Namco would stop putting money towards this, is that if this is one pool of money and the budget for it isn't expanding, you know, substantially. Let me see. Does this say how much the has a total investment limit of $40 million? Okay, so it sounds like, if more of that $40 million goes to projects that actually build like normal video games. Oh, VR was a part of this as well. I don't know what Bandai Namco does in VR. I wouldn't be surprised. Do they have like a Joyopolis kind of thing? I don't know. Anyways, but Namcha Town. I think that's a Namco owned thing, but I don't think they do VR stuff there. I don't know. I don't know what's going on in Namcha Town. Don't ask me questions. I know I've seen it on the PCFX. I saw them shooting guns virtually in Namcha Town on the PCFX, which Namcha Town is still around. I think Cargadin told me that she went once. I don't remember a thing about what she told me. I think she gave me some stickers or something from Namja Town. Anyways, but yeah, I think this is just one of those things where it's like the bigger story here is that this fund is being diversified in what it invests in, and I would assume people are more interested in like the games that come out of this versus like what metaverse stuff that's going to happen. So I think the thing that I'm seeing is that like generally, and maybe I'm just like, again, any kind of news story, it's always about like what you're seeing and what you're perceiving, right? Like recently I saw a thing where it's like, oh, we're crowdfunding to localize an Otome game, and I asked what's her name, what's her name, she's a big Otome content creator, Chloro Otome or something like that. She's like a cat lady, pink. And she's like, oh yeah, this just happens all the time. So I'm like, oh, here's this interesting novelty thing. But she's like, no, this is just what people do to like fundraising to localize games through like Kickstarter and stuff like that. I'm like, oh, okay, I didn't know that was happening. So sometimes it's about what you're perceiving, right? But I do feel like I'm not really seeing a lot of talk from Square Enix about their crypto stuff anymore. Symbiosis Genesis, I haven't checked in on that lately. That was supposed to run for, I think it was 6 seasons, and then it was supposed to end. That was the thing. And I haven't heard them talk about anything in that regard. Sony did launch their blockchain stuff, but I don't think anything's really come out of that from what I've seen. And then Sega's moving forward with their NFT game, but the last time we looked at that, it was very much underplaying the NFT element of it. It was a part of it still. But it didn't seem to be the focus. It was their that one arcade game. It's like the card game, like feudal lords in Japan kind of thing deal. So, anyways, but it does feel like I've been saying this for like 2 years now. It does feel like we're on the slow back pedal from this stuff at this point. That being said, I mentioned this last week. Looking into it, it does seem like the space is growing, but it could be that it's not growing at a rate that is important enough for companies of the scale of like a Bandai Namco or something like that, right? So I think that's I thought that was pretty interesting. So I didn't pull up a video for this, but Code Vein, we're in incognito mode on YouTube if you're watching the video version. The Code Vein 2 got announced during Summer Games Fest. I don't really have much to say about Summer Games Fest in general. Oh no, I'm inappropriate. All right, we're not gonna worry about it. Go look up a Code Vein trailer if you want to see it on the video version. But the reason why I want to talk about Code Vein 2 really has nothing to do with the game. I think what it is to me is like the end of a saga of like, and I think I felt very similarly about Media Vision at times. Where it's just like, what the heck are they doing? Where are they? And what are they doing? And I think Code Vein 2 is like, for me, is like, oh, what is Shift doing? And I'm like, I think the excitement is like trying to figure out like what is Shift doing. That's like kind of the fun, and you want to see what actually shows up in front of you, and then it's kind of neat to be like, oh, what are they working on? But I think it's kind of obvious they've probably been working on Code Vein 2, given how well Code Vein 1 did. And then in watching the Code Vein 2 trailer, I was just like, this seems fine. I think it's great if you liked Code Vein. A lot of people liked Code Vein, and I have not played the original Code Vein. And so this runs into the issue that we always run into on this podcast of, okay, Ben is looking for something new to be introduced to the world, into my world. Let's put it that way, because what's entirely new is always the whole other thing. But Code Vein 1 exists, and so Code Vein 2 represents to me what Code Vein 1 is, and I have not played Code Vein 1. So, I really like God Eater. I really like Freedom Wars. And I know Dimps is involved in Freedom Wars. That's a whole other thing. And I guess I was just kind of hoping to see, I guess, maybe foolishly so, hoping to see some kind of feeling of like evolution onto the next thing. And then we just kind of end up with more Code Vein. Especially after all this time. Because like Code Vein was like a pre-2020 game. So it's been a long time. And so I think what we're looking at now, because like in a perfect world, I would play Code Vein and Code Vein 2. It'd be a wonderful experience. I'd have a great time and I'd enjoy it, right? Maybe I'd be like, oh, Code Vein 2 is too much like Code Vein 1, and then that's my feeling. And I don't mind playing those games and feeling that way, right? But I think the one thing that I think we continue to run up onto this show is like, what will I make time for? And I think the answer we always kind of stick to is just like, I will not make time for this. And I think the question maybe that I think might be more interesting sometimes is like why I won't make time for this, right? So why won't I make time for Code Vein, right? And I think in a lot of ways with Code Vein, it is very much like, I don't have like a lot of curiosity around like the Dark Souls genre, and I feel like in general, and I know people don't like, some people don't like it being called like Dark Souls, but like vaguely it looks very Dark Souls-y when I get the impression of what comes off of it. You know, when I look at it and I'm trying to figure out like why would I play this game, I feel like that is the big thing for me. It's like, oh, it's like very Dark Souls-y, and that's kind of the thing. So it's like, what if Shift did Dark Souls? And I think the answer is that like, I don't think that is actually an interesting question to me of like, what if Shift did Dark Souls? I think that's the problem with Code Vein. That is the question I'm asking is why, what if Shift made Dark Souls? And I don't think that's like I don't think that why is enough, right? Recently I was thinking about this idea because like, part of me is like, I should just get rid of all my physical games and just live my life. But what I like about physical games is that it gives me a library to work with, right? And so I like picking up games that kind of like look like they would be interesting to me. And so when I pick up these games at different parts of my lives, I kind of am looking at them in different lenses with different interests and different expectations. At the time, I was just curious, what is Shift doing next? And I think that's what I'm more excited about is what is Shift doing next? So having Code Vein 2 be the thing that they're doing next, just kind of like, eh. But I think there might be a world where instead of buying video games, I have a limited point system of video games. This makes sense, all right? What does this mean? This means that, like, the reason I have physical games primarily is to focus what I'm doing. And money adds, like, a level of tension to that, right? I was recently looking at a fitness boxing game by Bandai Namco that was on the Wii, and I looked at it, and I said, wonderful, I would love to look at this. But. I have a lot of other extra games that I haven't touched on. Mom-chan? That disc has never been in my Wii yet. And Mom-chan's diet deserves to be in my Wii. So, you know, I think there's like things like that where it's like, what is this point value? What does this take? Like, what purpose does this game serve in my library? And I think we talked about like Super Panya Golf before. Is like this game, adding this game to my library serves no purpose, right? But adding money as a factor there is like a point of tension. So I don't just say, this looks interesting, add it, right? So I wonder if I have with my backloggery like a limit of like the number of games that can end up in there, right? And then from there, it's about clearing out what I want to clear out or removing something from it. So if I'm going to remove a game, if I'm going to add a game, remove an old game. And so that would add a point of tension of A, I'd have to go remove it, and then B, part of why I like having a library of games is it keeps reminding me that game exists. So when the time comes that I'm looking for something, I know that it's there, right? When it's time to Wii golf, I'm ready. Super Panya. Actually don't think Panya Golf is maybe like, what's it called in America? Super Swing Golf? I don't think Panya Golf is like a great like motion control golf game on the Wii from what I played. I remember it feeling like it was probably better served as like a button game. And then playing something like Tiger Woods, which has the Wii Motion Plus support, probably would be the better golfing experience or something like that, right? So, I don't know. Maybe someday. We'll see. But I think that's like something I've been thinking about recently. It's just like, how do I control the flow of games into my library without kind of losing the ability to add games and add them to my brain and memory? Because a lot of these games we talk about, Code Vein 2, gonna tell you right now, it's gonna be gone. I guarantee you, maybe I shouldn't take guarantee you. I would be very surprised if I ever play Code Vein 2 in my lifetime. There would have to be some substantial thing. They'd have to put some garbage in there that would get me like real excited, right? Dragon Quest Champions is probably the last time that I was just like, oh, I gotta play this. I will register a fake Japanese address to go play Dragon Quest Champions. But I think that might be like an interesting approach kind of thing. why this is important, I think, is like a very difficult thing to convey at times. But I think a lot of this comes down to what we were talking about last week, where I was like, what am I? What am I conveying to people what I am, right? And one thing I think I have a really hard time with is sacrificing things. Because I think there's always like, I don't want to lose it just in case. I recently had an office chair sitting in my apartment for about a month, even though I pretty was sure I was going to get rid of it, but I wasn't quite sure yet. And it just sat there. And eventually I got rid of it for sure. And so I think at times I have trouble getting rid of things. Thankfully, I don't think I'm like a hoarder level kind of thing. I think it's just very specific things it's very hard for me to get rid of. And so there's always this feeling of like, I don't want to sacrifice something. But I really think there is some value in me really focusing down on certain things and being willing to sacrifice Code Vein 2 and say, Code Vein 2 out the window. We're dead. We're gone. Sorry, Code Vein. Shift, make a new IP. Maybe I'll be more interested. For now, I still have Code Vein 1 to play. So I can't complain too much. I can play that if I'm really curious about what Shift has next. And the answer is they gave me that answer 6 years ago and I just haven't touched it. So, but I really want to focus down on things, I think, to some extent. I think this is part of, like, I guess the thing I was trying to get to is, like, last week we were talking about, like, what am I doing and why am I doing it and all that stuff. And, like, what are the things that I could feel comfortable talking about? And I've talked to a lot of different people about it, and I think a lot of them have given me some mixture of answers that has kind of helped a lot. Although I think Joseph left a comment on that one that kind of simplified it down the most. And I even further simplified it, where I think what it really is saying is that, like, your content feels like half discovering fresh and novel experiences and appreciating overlooked games. And to me, if I had to, like, put that in one word, it would be curiosity. I think that's curiosity about games for me. And the other part of it was, like, self-reflection. And he put that as, like, the other half being about self-discovery via the medium, through the medium, which I remember talking to Alex about this a little bit, where he is kind of the mind, and I don't think this ended up in the podcast for the Final Fantasy 14 thing that came out. Hey, Alex Fraioli, talking about Final Fantasy 14, go check it out. But he talked about the idea of, like, making content personable is, like, probably going to be really important in the future, especially as we, like, sit here and we have a bunch of, like, AI dribble coming out right now, where, like, I don't know. I haven't been exposed to any kind of, like, AI posts about video games. I assume they exist out there. But, you know, I've heard things about, like, AI generated articles on websites. I haven't really been in a position where I've sat down and looked at it and be like, oh, this is an AI generated thing. I'm sure it's out there though. But I think self-reflection kind of fits in that, or like, here is this thing where I take my curiosity and make meaning behind it for myself. That's where I digest it, right? Curiosity is eating. The self-reflection is digestion, right? And I think where I do the digestion is on this podcast, in videos that I almost never do anymore, but I try to work on videos. We're talking about a video here shortly. It's the Final Fantasy 11 video, of course. And then the last thing in that as well, and this is, like, where I think I need to focus down on terms of, like, what am I giving to the world? Because I think, you know, curiosity and self-reflection are very, like, me-focused things, and I hope you guys enjoy looking at those things. And I hope you guys enjoy, like, I would hope to some extent that, like, me talking about these things help you navigate things yourself, but that's not really necessarily, this is a very me thing, I feel like, at the end of the day. I mean, I think I mentioned before, like, I'm pretty much journaling live on the internet for you to look at. But instead of, like, making those kind of topics within that my focus in terms of my expertise, I think maybe leaning into the PCFX thing at the end of the day is probably the best choice there. And then the other stuff, maybe kind of combine that down to just curiosity and self-reflection. So I think if there's 3 types of content I would like to continue making through my life, it is through, like, curiosity, consuming things that are interesting, self-reflection, making meaning out of the things I consume, and then giving back or purpose. In the case of the right now, I think that's the PCFX. I do still stand by, I think, the idea that, like, if somebody were to come and, like, really blow me out of the water in terms of, like, covering PCFX in a way that I felt like was really good and great, I think I would be happy to see that. And, like, it would free me up, I think, in a lot of ways to go to pursue something else. But I just don't see that really happening in the way that I personally want. I mean, that's, like, a lot of this kind of stuff happens where, you know, the reason I'm making a Final Fantasy 11 video is not because I necessarily think that, there isn't Final Fantasy 11 content out there. But it's because there's a particular way about Final Fantasy 11 that I want to talk that I don't think I see out there. And part of this is self-reflection as well, Final Fantasy 11. I think working on Final Fantasy 11 video, that has been a big part of it. It's like self-reflection of like, what did this game mean to me and why did it mean it and how does it facilitate those things, right? Code Vein. I don't really know. I feel like we kind of got off topic there, but I think the big thing there is just like focus, but stay curious. I think that's like the big things. I focus and stay curious. Is that the best thing? I don't know if that's the way I want to summarize that, but I think that for now, that's what I'm going to do. Speaking of Final Fantasy 11 video, Kofi, thank you so much. Demodori for donating again for the monthly donation that you could provide us. In that time, I have not spent the fund. I'm curious, how much are we at for the funds real quick here? Let me take a look-see. I know I haven't really been posting on the Ko-fi, so Demodori, I appreciate you for still supporting me. So like halfway through me taking a work day to focus on making a video. But I have been doing a lot of work on the Final Fantasy 11 video recently. So that is been difficult. It's a long video, and I think it feels especially hard up front. I think a big part of the reason why is because a lot of explaining has to happen early in Final Fantasy 11. And I think Final Fantasy 11 is actually very good at introducing key concepts to you earlier rather than later. And a lot of what the second part of the game is very much built on those experiences. But I think the way Final Fantasy 11 teaches these things is through the direct experience you have with the game. It's not a game with many tutorials. But part of this is like me having to like go back and think about like, how did I learn this about Final Fantasy 11? There's a very specific time. Let me talk to you about like one of the hardest parts of this video is there's like a period of time, level 1 through 10, that is pretty clear to describe what's happening there. That's pretty easy. It's a very like open-ended part of Final Fantasy 11. It's a very freeing aspect of that game where you can kind of just play it at your leisure, at your want. And there's a lot of things about that early Final Fantasy 11 that has unique value compared to the later parts of Final Fantasy 11. Because once you get deep enough in Final Fantasy 11, the ways that it asks you to play the game change. And I think there's a lot of points that Final Fantasy 11 likely is going to kick people out based off their willingness to play the game the way that, Square Enix has designed this game. So there's a transition period between those where you get level 10 and kind of like the first region around your city, and then you go to the place where you get your first parties. How you get from point A to point B is actually a really hard thing for me to remember, because by the time I was, 14, in my head, I knew how to get from point A to point B. That wasn't a problem. How did I figure that out before then, though? When I was like 13, just starting playing. And I had to like really sit down and think about like, what were my memories of the game at that point? And how did I interact with the game in this weird in-between time period between you having the freedom to sit there and play alone versus you going to get into a group in Valkyrie Dunes. And when I was playing Horizon 11, this wasn't an issue because I knew where to go. The issue I ran into with Horizon 11 was the nervousness of like knowing that I knew where I was going in Final Fantasy 11. In some ways, that made it a different experience where I knew once I get to this area, the way I interact with Horizon 11 and Final Fantasy 11 was going to change. And it was going to become long-term commitments to playing the game, right? And so that is something that like trying to convey how I, as a 13-year-old who had no idea how these games work, figure that out. How did I end up in that situation? And a lot of it, I think, is just through talking to people, right? I think that was definitely it back then. It was just like, you're just out there hitting stuff. Eventually you run into someone like, hey, you want to go hit stuff together? Sure. And then somebody's like, oh yeah, let's go to this area. And we all just die. And then it's like, okay. And then you go talk to somebody later. Yeah. Oh yeah. I've been to that area. I just died immediately. And they're like, oh, you need to go to, you need to go there and like get a full party or something like that. Right. These are not specific memories I have per se. It's just like the pieces of memory. So I'm like filling in the blanks here. And so how do you tell that story in a way that makes sense and doesn't paint it as like super, I don't know. It's hard because I can tell the parts of the video script right now where like I can see where I am uncertain. And I'm in some ways describing the feeling of playing Final Fantasy XI more than the mechanics of it, where I think anything where I am referencing Horizon 11, it is changing to the mechanics of the game. So it's like, I don't know if this is a bad thing, to be clear, but it's this weird, like almost back and forth between here's this very like emotional feeling about what it felt like playing Final Fantasy XI to here's this very mechanical thing, how parties work, how skill chains work, what did these things do, how did these things, keep players in communication with each other during gameplay and stuff like that. And another issue I'm having right now is like talking about the game in the present tense versus the past tense. I probably should just talk in the past tense, but like part of me like wants to talk about the present tense because I experienced somewhat today with Horizon, but that's not really the point of the video. So I think the just past tense is for the best, but I think talking in past tense can be a little weird sometimes. I think if I recall correctly in journalism, it's like when you write in a newspaper, you write past tense. When you do news reports, you do present tense. And I don't necessarily remember the reason why that's the case. So, I don't know. Anyways, that's my memory. I don't know. Journalism majors, come here and slap me and say that's wrong. So, anyways, there's the Final Fantasy XI video update. It's going to take a while. It's just going to take a while. So, I feel bad that I haven't worked on it nearly as much as I probably should have. But here we are. And hey, Ben's got a busy life. There's a lot going on with my life. And so trying to figure that out, I don't know, give myself some slack. Kind of a side note here real quick as well. This is actually pretty interesting. Actually, there's one thing I don't think I could talk about. I don't know. There's one thing I'm not going to talk about because I don't know if I'm supposed to talk about it. I'll say this. Somebody asked me to do voiceover for somebody recently. I was very strange. Not like in a character voice or everything, but like reading a quote. But I appreciate it. That was interesting. I had to go through the process of like telling my brain not to tell them all the reasons why I don't think I should do it. It's just like, okay, I will do it. I will read this quote. And it was a good time. So that will show up at some point. I don't want to say who it is because I don't know if they want people to know about it. I don't know how secretive they are about their videos. So anyways, and then also someone reached out to me recently about Buddy Mission Bond. They were looking at one of my old videos. I think it was a Patreon video actually, where I was unboxing the soundtrack from, I think, the Blu-ray release that I had unboxed, which I unfortunately never got the second Buddy Mission Bond Blu-ray. But when in there's like lyrics for the songs, a lot of vocal songs about Mission Bond. So I went ahead and sent that over to them, and they made I think it's called Nico Kara is what they were calling it. I don't know where that term originates from. I assume for Nico, but I don't know. That's just me making an assumption based off the word Nico, which tells me it's a Japanese word, so it very much could be applied to anything that's not the brand Nico Doga or whatever it's called. So, but they went ahead and edited together some like really cute videos that they put together that was basically for karaokeing alongside those songs. I think that's really cool. They apparently are like digging into the files of the games too. I think that's super exciting. I don't know anything about like Switch hacking and stuff like that, but that was actually really neat. And I don't know if they like were able to get the raw video files from there or whatever, but they edited together some video. I'm not 100% sure how much was like their editing on their own versus like using edits that that already existed in some of the Buddy Mission Bond promo materials and things like that. But it all looks pretty clean, so I feel like it might just be their edits. So I think it's interesting. It's cool. I'll link it in the description here at some point if I remember. Hopefully I read over these notes when I'm editing the podcast later and I figure that out. So, anyways, thank you again, Demodori. Thank you again. Lee, I believe is their name, who are reaching out to me for the Buddy Mission Bond stuff. That's great. I'm really excited to see that. And also, I know I'm a little late on this, but Joseph, thank you again for the feedback on the YouTube video as well. For me, like having an identity crisis on the podcast in real time. So yeah, gamers, I did it. You ever heard of a thing called virtual reality? It's where you play Virtua Fighter. I got a VR headset finally, in which you're like, Ben, you already had a VR headset. Well, what I really mean is like a real VR headset. So previously I'd gotten a PlayStation VR, very cheap, mind you. It was like $50 for pretty much everything. Bought it in Japan, so it was nice. I used it once, and so part of me has always been like, since I bought that, I'm like, if I'm gonna invest the time, then I use that headset. If I want to really learn about this, use that headset. The problem being is that most of my time that I would potentially spend with VR here in the short term, and probably the things I'm most excited to check out, are not on PSVR. There are things I'm curious about on PSVR, but the things I'm excited for, not on PSVR. So I recently got some birthday money, and I've been trying to be more decisive in what I do recently and not just floating around the idea. I've been thinking about getting a VR headset for what is, I think at this point, almost 10 years now. I don't remember when this whole thing happened, but it's getting close to a decade for sure. And I was just like, I should just do it. So I was like, I just need to pick one up. So I got a MetaQuest 3S, and is that what it's called? MetaQuest? I think it's like the evolution of the Oculus brand. I don't think Oculus is around anymore. I think they got absorbed into Facebook, which Facebook became Meta. Yeah, I think this is how this works. So MetaQuest 3S is like a cheaper version of the MetaQuest 3. So it's the budget headset basically. But for $300, that was probably the most I was willing to spend for something like this. So the kind of the thing that I'm trying to think of like what I want to talk about here, but like, let me just say this first and foremost. Obviously playing PlayStation VR, I have some semblance of like what's going on with VR. PlayStation VR is a very seated experience. It's a bit different. But I think what was interesting to me was the tracking stuff. This is really what I wanted out of VR, was like better tracking. Because PlayStation VR is like okay at it. It's not great. And when it comes to like messing around with like VR chat on PC, like, there's just not a lot of great options for being on mouse and keyboard for interacting with the world. So like the idea of like having hands, I can go grab things. That's like really important to me, I think, in VR chat kind of thing. And I think the thing that I was like maybe most impressed by when I first started it up was when they were like, hey, put the controllers down, hand tracking mode. We'll just track your hands. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. And like navigating the menus just by like using your hands and using hand gestures and stuff. And it definitely like kicked like a weird sense of like excitement in me that I feel like I haven't felt in a long time with like working with different like types of hardware for games and things like that. Of just like, oh, this is like my hands are these separate tracked things and they actually get tracked accurately and you could see them and like how they're being tracked too. I think maybe that's the more important thing to me, because like I will be honest, like sitting there and like actually navigating everything is cumbersome. But like being able to see that like, oh, it's actually pretty good at tracking my hands is actually like pretty neat. And then the initial setup process is all in AR, so you kind of see your hands, but you also see like kind of the glow around your hands kind of thing, right? And so weirdly enough, kind of my initial experience with VR, I think was most excited in setting the thing up. Just like, and it's not even like that fun of an interface, something like that. It's not like a Nintendo thing. It's got a little bit of personality, but very, very slight. Like probably like Nintendo Switch level personality, right? Like it's a very Nintendo looking and sounding thing. This thing has its own slight feel to it on its own, but I don't think it like feels crazy. It's like little bits of music here and there just to kind of make things nice. And occasionally like you'll fade into like certain environments while it's like, hey, check out, it's VR time. You're in a jungle. And instead of like, this is like where I thought it was a little weird. They're like, you're in a jungle, you're in the snowy mountain range. But like, instead of like rendering an environment around you that looks like that, like even just like, hey, let's just like build something in Unity real quick that we just show you, or like, I don't know, randomly generate a world or something. I don't know. They like have just you in the center of like a disc with like a picture around you. And it's very clear, just a skybox. It's just like, okay, it's just like you can be in the snowy mountains and it's just like this JPEG above you. So I don't know, maybe you have a better headset, it's a better experience, but I just thought that was kind of funny. They're like, check it out. It's like, oh, big JPEG dope. But yeah, the hand tracking stuff was like the thing that like really got me initially excited. And I'm gonna talk about VR chat here in a little bit, but the first thing I did was check out VR chat, mostly because I knew that the process for setting this stuff up was a little wonky, because I'm not really using any of the hardware in the headset itself. I'm connecting it to my PC to do stuff. And a big part of the reason why I'm doing that is VR chat. I think just I could use the in-game VR chat. I'd have to make a new account, so I'm like, eh. But the other part of this too is that like I want to check out DL site games, because there's not that many games on DL site in like the all ages section. If you want to go to the sexy time zone, there's stuff there. But like looking at the normal all ages DL site VR games, which is a pretty limited list, there was about like maybe 5 or 10 things I wanted to check out. But one of the biggest reasons I wanted a VR headset was to play a game called Cooperate with the Giantess. That's what the File Explorer listing says for it. I don't know for sure if that's what the Japanese translation is. And we talked a little bit about the Giantess stuff recently, because we're talking about Gun Gun Pixies, and I was trying to like figure out like why does the giant person in Gun Gun Pixies matter? Because when I look at Gun Gun Pixies, what I think about is the adoptive storyline. That's like the thing that excites me most about Gun Gun Pixies, and then also the secondary to that is like jumping around on bookshelves and stuff and like shooting things. Like it's kind of fun navigating around a world that you're like a tiny person in. I think it's just like a cool thing. And then so when I thought about like what role does the giant person in the center of the room play when it comes to Gun Gun Pixies, it's kind of nothing, right? They just kind of like sit there, you shoot them, and then you like make them, relaxed or whatever, which, has its own sexual tendencies with that. But that's kind of just what it is. And I do like that game, but I don't think it's necessarily for the reasons I originally came into that game expecting, of just like, hey, what's it like to fight this giant lady with an assault rifle that shoots like little energy beams that make them relaxed and sleepy, kind of thing. So what was interesting to me about this game in particular is that these were very direct interactions with this giant. So basically it's a very simple game. It's like less than 15 minutes on your first playthrough, and like that's it. There's one stage. All you're doing is collecting 5 coins in the environment. So you're like this little like weird soldier guy. I'm pretty sure it's all like used like Unity assets, things like that. So like I don't think there's any unique aesthetic here or anything like that. But you go collect these coins, and but to get around the level, to get up to collect the coins, you have this giant fox lady who is able to like kind of pick you up and move you around the environment. So you have basically the ability to move around yourself a little bit, and you can jump. So there's a lot of things. I wouldn't be surprised if you could just like jump around and like beat the whole game without ever interacting with this lady. But kind of the important thing is that you basically blow a little whistle. She comes, she'll pick you up, and then she kind of walks you around the room, and you can use that as a way to like scout for where the coins are, when you find a coin, you can basically point and click at a place and say, hey, I want to go there. And she's not very gentle about letting you go. She kind of like just like throws you up places. It's pretty jarring at times, especially in VR, because she just will like grab you and you just kind of like move around in a way you're not really expecting. So all the Japanese, all 2 Japanese reviews that were there were talking about the fact that they were getting like motion sickness from playing. And I did get a little bit of motion sickness, but only from a very specific thing where like I'm about like the spoilers. There's a coin that's on herself, so you have to figure out how to get to the coin on her body. I'll put it that way. And so it's actually hard to do. It's the hardest one to get, in my opinion. But not so much for the fact that like it's just a difficult like task. It's more just the game's a little janky in how you interact with her body as you kind of move down her body, kind of thing. And then so like you have to keep falling off. So I'm like, every time I fall off, I ask her to grab me. And then like, so it's kind of funny because she'll grab you midair. So you'll be like falling down, just like grabbed, and then like your camera will tilt and jank as she moves you in front of her, kind of thing. And then you can put yourself back up above her and then drop back down, kind of thing. So, but yeah, I like the core concept a lot because it is this thing where you're having to cooperate with this giant to get you to go to places, right? This giant ideally is the only way you can get to places. I think my big problem, other than the short length, I wasn't expecting much. It's like a $4 or $5 game for DL site. For a short experience, that's about right. DL site, like Japanese doujin games, price themselves at the right price, in my opinion, which is often very expensive from a Western point of view. But these are, very small projects, and I think it's good for people to get their value out of it, right? But it's like $3 right now. I think it was on sale when I picked it up. So, very short experience overall. But I think within the scope of the game, what I would have liked to have seen is it to be more dangerous for you to fall? Because I think there's a lot of opportunity when you play that game to just throw yourself on the ground, pick up, start over, put yourself back up top. But I think if it was a little bit more dangerous, where there's like a certain fall damage or something like that, where you can't fall after a certain height, it would make navigating that world a lot more interesting. And it also, I think, would make you a lot more careful with where the lady's going to put you, rather than just throwing yourself up in the air and just hoping you land somewhere kind of thing. Part of that's like self-control and things like that. You don't necessarily have to drop down like way far, but I think it'd be a funner way to be like, oh, she can't reach me here, and I need to get back to her to give her the coin. So how do I get back down there to the point where she can reach me? And then so she can reach up and grab me off the shelf. Because there's sometimes you're on something that's way above her, and so she'll reach and try to get you, but she can't get you, kind of thing. So I think that would have been pretty cool to like add some stakes to it. With that kind of thing. And if it was a longer game, I think there would be having more diversity in how you interact with her would be, I think, better as well. I think putting the coin on her body does change the game a little bit, which I think is cool. But I think overall, more or less, she's just kind of picking you up and throwing you. And I think that's a cool concept. This is more or less a tech demo kind of thing. But I think it would have been nice to see it like fleshed out a bit more. But again, I think I can only ask so much for something built like this, right? So I thought it was a pretty neat game, and it was one of the three things I wanted to really check out in VR. The other things I bought maybe like $20 worth of DL site stuff, so I will look at those at some point here shortly. But the other thing that I want to play is Medal of Honor. That's like the shooter on there. I don't know how to go about that yet. I assume it's available for purchase somewhere. I don't know if it'd like run in the headset, but I'm connected to PC because I'm trying to capture gameplay and stuff like that too. One thing that I did want to talk about though, because looking at the two reviews that are on the DL site, I think they kind of, I'm trying to remember for sure if this is the case. I do think they kind of mentioned the fact that like, giant ladies is often, I don't know if it's entirely, but often is like a sexual preference kind of thing, right? It's some sexual fetish you have kind of thing. Having a giant lady who is, able to pick you up holding your hands, that kind of thing, right? And I don't really mind this, but I did get like a few comments from different people about like, oh, here's your big sexual giant lady thing, which I don't have a giantess fetish, so like I'm not necessarily saying that like this is what I'm into. But this is kind of part of the problem, I think. It's like this is like not problem, but the way that it's interesting to see information being provided to me is like, oh, you're playing this giant lady game kind of thing. And to some degree, I think I have leaned into that sometimes when I talk about this game. Like when I leaned into Jeep Thrills being a bad game, and then I had to sit down and actually look at Jeep Thrills and like, okay, Jeep Thrills, clean slate Jeep Thrills. What's going on here? And be like, oh, Jeep Thrills is a cool video game. But I think like sometimes I can have a tendency to do that. So maybe like part of this was like fed by that. Although I think the people I didn't talk to about this game before, I did have a couple comments about it in that regard. But it's this really, really weird question that we kind of run into from time to time. And I had this problem back when we talked about Blueport J a long time ago, which Blueport J, if you don't know, it's a really cute game if you don't know what's going on. Where it's like a little island vacation. You're going around, you're doing little discoveries, you're finding hidden treasure, and there's this construction company trying to come in and take the island, but you're finding the treasure where you're gonna save the island, kind of thing, right? And it's a little cute game. There's 3 girls, they all have different like skills and things like that, and so certain ones do better underwater in terms of like breathing time. Other ones have like more physical strength, and then one has like the ability to like see objects in the water better and kind of thing. So there's like different reasons to use all these different girls. It's a very chill game. They're just having a good time on this beach kind of thing, yada yada yada. You go look into the artist, they're maybe into stuff involving characters drowning. That's kind of their whole thing. And the thing I will say is that like Mario 64 has a more like animated drowning animation than Blueport J ever did, but it's still a part of there. And once you have that context, it can be hard to kind of look past that. And looking into the developer for this like big lady VR game, it's absolutely a similar thing there as well. They did the game that they seem to have worked on the most. This game where you kind of fight this big, I don't know if she's like a succubus or something like that. This big succubus lady, I think though, you have like 2 swords, and there's kind of different ways she like tries to attack you and stuff like that. And to me, it didn't look that interesting because I think at the end of the day, I don't think VR combat's very dynamic And so when I think about like fighting a giant, I think Shadow of the Colossus for me feels like a better example for something like that. Even though it's not VR, right? If I saw something that like really, I think conveyed that sense of scale in a similar way and like the grandness of that, I think maybe I would feel a little more different about this game. But this game is like everything just feels very loose and light and just like nothing's really going on here. But it definitely leans into that aspect of like, she's going to crush you between her feet kind of thing. And she's going to put you in her mouth and chew you up kind of thing. And like, to me, it's just like, I'm looking for gameplay stuff in this game. So I'm just like, oh, well, this isn't really that interesting to me kind of thing. In the same way, I think with like Blueport J, the developer for that game, like one of the interesting things about those consistently is that like the theme of drowning is a part of them as a whole. And so obviously for their preferences, that's one thing. But for me, I think like game design wise, it adds this interesting tension to every game. Like every game they make in different genres all have this similar tension of drowning. And so you're always on this like limited time, like you are always going to go underwater and there's going to be this tension of what's like of you potentially drowning. And then from there, if it's like a shooter or is it a puzzle game or is it an adventure game like Blueport J, like all these things have different ways they play out, right? And I think that's kind of interesting that there's like this core theme that kind of defines the game design of all these things. And so I don't really know like how to handle that, I think, with people sometimes, because it's just one of those things that like, and I think for me, maybe part of the problem is that like, for me, like when I talk about games, I don't really like mixing like sexual feelings into game discussion stuff. To me, it doesn't feel very good in a conversation. I'm not saying it can't be good. Maybe it's something I should reconsider someday, but like, I don't really want somebody on the other side of me to be like talking about Senran Kagura and be like, yeah, but I really like their big boobs kind of thing, right? It's just like not super interesting to me. Senran Kagura Reflections, similar thing there. Like Senran Kagura Reflections, I think there's like a lot of interesting things that game does with intimacy. And the thing, I think the reason why I like the hand massaging stuff the most is like, it is the most intimate part of that game. Everything else is just kind of like slapping the lady in the thighs and the hearts go up and she's in like a pink radiant void and you know, all that stuff's going on. You got to fill the meter and then, you know, whatever. But like, to me, it's like more about like, okay, how do we match the intimacy of like some of these cutscenes? Some of the characters, the intimacy of the cutscenes is not that important. But there are like characters like the gloomy girl. I remember her having some interesting stuff story-wise in there. Just like these kind of like, oh, what is it like to have these kind of like one-on-one relationship with these characters, where you are kind of the person in that spot, right? So anyways, I didn't mean to go on the Senran Kagura thing, but I think a lot of times it is about what does somebody assume about you because of this, right? Another video game, but I think it is relevant here. We're talking about on an upcoming podcast. We're talking about Welcome to PA Care with the PCFX fan club, giving you a little sneak peek there. And so like part of this is a game that's like about high schoolers, right? And it's a 18 plus game, but like high schoolers are the characters. And so like if you want to go into it, you can have like the most like aggressive thoughts about like what were the intentions of the people who made this, right? Were they people who wanted to exploit high schoolers or something like that? And then also you can have the intentions of like who the target audience was. Are these old men who want to like exploit high schoolers or kind of thing? Or is it like, you know, a bunch of college students who just got out of high school and that's kind of their experience with love, right? And so, you know, especially in media, when you think about Japanese media, like high school is a very big focus of that. And so like, it seems pretty natural to end up in that spot. Whether you think that's right or wrong, I think is another thing. But, you know, when it comes to like looking at the environment of what builds that. And so it's like, oh, like you can kind of like pick out these sexual things. And if you're willing to build a story around that, you can do that if you want. Right. I think that's like one challenge that I have in general is like when I talk to people and it feels like they already have something they want to believe already. And so depending on who you talk to, it's a little hard to know how to navigate that conversation. Because I recently playing VR chat, this is something, I don't remember if I talked about this on the show. This is previously before I got a VR headset. We'll get into the VR headset for VR chat here in a second. Was like, I was playing VR chat with my friends and they have been more and more into like the tracking stuff and like what that looks like and all that stuff. And this is true when you look at other things too. I'm not saying it's just like people I played with, but like everyone likes to look at themselves in VR chat. That seems to be the thing. They like to see themselves moves. They put on this character body and then they move, right? And so I was talking to a friend about this, and like it immediately goes to the sexual aspect of it. Of just like, oh, well, the sexy girl, so they're being very horny about it and all that stuff. And then so I feel like once you're in that part of the conversation where you start at the end point of where you think they are, it is suddenly significantly harder to understand, to actually find the real answer, right? If that makes sense. So when I am like navigating this conversation, I'm like trying to make sure that that end point is not where we're starting. And like if somebody starts there, I have to try to like pull it back and say, where are we actually going with this conversation, right? I think furries had a similar thing that they kind of dealt with, and I think as substantially improved. I could be wrong, but like furries used to just be a sexual thing in terms of how people would see it. A lot of people, not in terms of the community. I'm not saying the community itself, but the way for a long time it was very much that. And then now I think things have very much diversified. There's a better understanding of what the furry community is, and like what they like out of being in the furry avatars in the case of VR chat, right? And so I think there's a lot of like when you're sitting down and thinking about these things, you have to be willing to explore different directions and realize that just because there is a visible goal, that doesn't mean it's the actual goal, right? And so I think with like the big lady VR thing, she's a very easy visible goal to reach to, rather than this like very more obscure kind of like, what does it mean to cooperate with this giant character who's going to move you around kind of thing, right? And I think VR adds to that, because you're going to have to sit there, you're going to look up and the giant lady's there, right? And it's like, oh, here's this giant lady. Does she have big boobs? Absolutely. But, that doesn't really impact the gameplay, in my opinion. There's no, like boob trampoline mechanic or something like that, right? So, I think it's just one of those things that like, I think when people start with this assumed end goal of where they're going, it's a little hard to have those conversations. And I worry sometimes when I talk about this stuff though in real life, because I think some people, I have a hard time with small talk. I don't think everyone wants to sit there and have a conversation of like, what is the real, like, no, I don't think everybody wants to figure out what is going on all the time. I think my brain is wired in a way where like, I'm like a 10-year-old asking why all the time. And that's helpful for me. I learn a lot that way. But at the same time, I don't know if anybody's just like, I just want to make a joke about furries. And then I'm like, well, why? It's like this whole conversation about why furries are the way furries are, right? And it just becomes a big, long thing. So I don't know if that's like, I feel like this happened more recently, and I'm not sure if it's because I'm talking to more people on like Hot Pot Gaming. So like the way my brain is wiring questions might be different. Or the other thing I've considered as well is I don't do this show nearly as much. So I'm not venting this stuff out in the way I maybe would have vented it more often beforehand to you guys directly. So that might be a vote for making the show more often again. So I don't know. We'll see. The big thing is that like doing the show frequently, it's just a lot of commitment sometimes. But I am trying to like not anytime I'm trying to solve, if there's an issue I have with the show, I'm trying to solve those things, not trying to let them linger. So anyways, but that's just kind of my thoughts on that stuff. That was a big, long topic, but hopefully that's interesting or helps people understand. I think I've talked to people before because they'd be like, oh, it's really weird like how you talk about center and cooker reflections, because it's like, it feels like you're deflecting from the sexual stuff, and very much I could be. I think one thing I very much do with like Angelique on the PCFX is use that as examples, because it deflects from the sexual aspect. It gets the end goal off, because a lot of guys are going to look at something like Graduation 2 and make a lot of immediate assumptions about what Graduation 2 is doing for people, which is not like that bad. It's just like, you're in this high school raising simulator. There's some like, sexy art. It's not an 18+ game, but there's like some sexy outfits, I think. I haven't played it, so don't take my word for it. Maybe something bad shows up. I don't know. But it's not an 18+ game on the system at the very least. I can say that much. But when I put in Angelique there and we focus more on like, what do women like out of men? The conversation is just smoother for me, in my opinion. And I feel like when I do that, I see a different reaction from people, right? Because I think people assume very different things about like how women are attracted to men sometimes, in like a fantasy sense kind of thing. I could be wrong about that, so don't take that as a word. That's just like my personal anecdotal evidence about that kind of thing. So anyways, Speaking of sexy times, though, oh boy, sexy games, Gal Guardians. If you don't remember what Gal Guardians is, this is a. I have gameplay of this. I can bring this up. You can see what Gal Guardians looks like. Let me do that. There you go, Gal Guardians. Yeah. So this is like a. I don't know. This is kind of a weird game where a lot of people thought it'd be like Symphony of the Night just because of how it looks. But it actually plays a lot more like Bloodstained Curse of the Moon, which if you don't know, that's kind of like this weird in-between. I'd say it's more like Rondo of Blood Castlevania style game where there's like branching paths, there's like hidden secrets, and that kind of unlocks different endings and things like that depending on what you do kind of thing. I will say, actually, one thing I should mention before we get too deep into this, I played this through Steam stream play kind of thing, so I had a little bit of trouble there just because connection issues always, but I always think the Steam multiplayer thing works, but this is a local only game, so I had to remotely play with a friend kind of thing. But yeah, it's got that Curse of the Moon structure, so it does have like a little bit of exploration, but it's primarily kind of a point A to B platformer, but you will revisit a lot of places, which I think we'll get into later. But I think the big difference is that Curse of the Moon is a game very much built off like Castlevania 3, where you have the ability to play like multiple different characters and things like this. This more or less just has two characters. In single player, you can switch between the two. In two players, you do not switch between the two. You just like help each other out basically. So where Curse of the Moon is a little bit more focused on like what type of abilities each character has. This game feels a lot more focused on sub-weapons. So the primary moveset is, I think Shinobu is the main girl's name, and she's got like an Uzi, and so like all of her sub-weapons typically are built around like ranged attacks and explosives and things like that. So these all very much kind of like ranged damage kind of moves. But then also you have Maya, which is the secondary character, and she's a melee-focused kind of glass cannon style character. Which I don't like her sub-weapons as much. They're a lot more like puzzle-oriented, I'd say, than they are useful for combat. So there does like feel like there's this very big focus on like, I don't want to use, or for at least me, this feeling of like, I don't want to use any of Maya's sub-weapons because they waste energy, and I'd rather have the main girl with the explosives use those instead. So, but yeah, so it's kind of like this, I guess you could say, pretty standard kind of 2D action platformer with a little bit of like light narrative or like light exploration. It is, if you don't know, the pun of this game's name is Gal Guardians, which is based off the Gal Gun franchise, which I haven't played Gal Gun yet. I do have one of the games on Switch, but basically it's this whole series that's kind of about trying to get a girl by going around and shooting them with the pheromone gun or whatever. It's very jokey. It's a very like silly way that they kind of present this kind of like I guess you could say finding your high school romance kind of thing, and it is goofy in the way that like a lot of these kind of like more anime-esque like sexual focused kind of games can be. But because of that, I think narratively it doesn't have a lot going on. It's definitely more about just like, do you enjoy the character interactions in this game? And so all the characters are kind of goofy. It does have that problem where like some character dialogue just feels like it goes on a little too long sometimes, where it's just like, I feel like I'm like going through the gym and like you're rescuing schoolgirls and stuff, and they can talk to you in the gym and stuff like that, and it's just like, oh, these are just long dialogue trees they have to go through. Or you don't have to go through them; they're optional, but they don't take that long. But there's just a lot of girls to kind of get through, kind of thing. But it can get a little repetitive overall. Basically, there's kind of like 3 core playthroughs. You kind of have your first playthrough where you unlock all your sub weapons and stuff. And then you have a secondary playthrough that you use to basically unlock the upgrades to your sub weapons. And in these secondary playthroughs, you get, when you have your sub weapons, you have access to different paths and things like that. So you can go ahead and kind of like navigate through different alternative paths and start trying to finish getting all the collectibles and things like that. And then you get to like the end of the game, you get like an alternate boss ending and all that stuff. But then they ask you to play through the game a third time. And I feel like the third time, it's a little much. And like part of my beef with the third time playing it is this, it basically asks you to go on a collectathon through the game again without offering any really new content. You know, the sub weapons aren't really, aren't like upgrading anymore. What's it called? with like secret doors and stuff. They're like, you've been through all the secret doors and all that stuff. So really all you're doing is going and like revisiting old areas, and there's no like marker on you have like a compass that usually shows you like treasures and where like lost school girls are and things like that. There's no like markers on your compass or anything like that for them. So it just feels like you're blindly running through this castle trying to hope you find all their panties. You have to find a bunch of panties in the environment. So it's one of those games that just like, I think it could have been a little shorter and the game probably would have been better for it. But the ending itself that you get from doing the collectathon stuff, I think is pretty fun and pretty cute. And if you're a Galgun fan, you probably already played this, but it has like a nice little kind of like Easter egg ending to it that I think is really fun. And so, yeah, it's just like a totally solid kind of game like this. I do think I like it more than like Curse of the Moon 2, because as much as I think is like Curse of the Moon 1 and 2, well, they're both probably better games than Gal Guardians. I think Curse of the Moon 2 is just a little too samey compared to the first game. The big difference with that game is that I added on 2 players, and so that was kind of like the novelty of it, and that's how I played it last time. But when I think about the core game, I think this one just puts a little extra distance between it and the original Curse of the Moon, so it makes it feel a bit more fresh. And so I overall think I preferred playing this game if I wanted something that felt a little bit more distinct. But I do think it's very much still in that kind of like Bloodstained Curse of the Moon line kind of thing. So Gal Guardians, okay video game. 7.5. I'm giving scores, baby. I think my friend said he gave it a 7.5, and so I think that's why I gave that to him. So the nice thing about the Steam Play stuff for that game in particular is that like it's not a very platforming heavy game, so it's pretty reasonable. Let me get at the River City Ransom footage here. River City, what is it called? River City Underground. That's what it's called. River City Underground. There we go. I have never played a River City game before. So this is coming from the context of somebody who, well, actually I lied. I played some of it on Switch Online, but I didn't get very far. I was playing it 2 players with my dad, and the frame rate was a nightmare. But I think this might be my first River City game. But I think it's from a different team than the traditional team that does like, well, the franchise has been around so long, I'm sure tons of people have touched it, but I think it is not technically a mainline game in that franchise or whatever. But yeah, it's basically like a little chibi brawler kind of thing. I think the Japanese series of the name is called Kunio-kun. And I feel like what is interesting about this game particularly is that it has a diversity of characters. So I don't remember how many total characters there are, but I was playing in a group of 4 people, and so there's like 4 characters in the beginning, and I think you maybe unlock another like, let's say somewhere between like 5 and 8. I don't know for sure. Don't check me on the math. But each character kind of plays in their own unique way. I played as Paul, which is like the boxer, and it sounds like Paul is maybe the most broken way to play the game. So I don't know if I chose a good way to play the game or the worst way to play the game, because most of the game for me was just punching. But there's a lot of characters that are like grappler types, or they might have like a more like, Ryu move set for like the Street Fighter character with like Hadoukens and things like that. But when you first start the game, it is everyone's having that very much like Double Dragon, just kind of like everybody punch everybody kind of thing. You're like moving between the lanes up and down and all that kind of stuff. So, the way you kind of build your characters to doing like upgrades and things like that. So as you kill enemies, you like get money, and that is really where the point of tension is with this game, where basically you sit down and you you kill enemies to get money, basically. And when you die, you lose, I believe it's half your money. So as you're trying to like save up and buy things, you really want to like try to hold on to all your money if possible. But in the case of at least multiplayer, I played this 4-player with some friends. When you die, you respawn back pretty much immediately, but you lose that money basically. So that's really the point of tension of making sure that like you don't die, so you can continue to upgrade. And if you don't maintain your health, if you're not precious with your money, you'll end up falling behind in a multiplayer session for sure. I was very fortunate where I just, again, punched everybody, and I did really well. But you can level up through like eating food. You can also buy different moves, so your base move set expands. Again, with Paul, I mostly just kept punching, so we didn't really play a role. But a lot of the other characters, it seemed like their new moves and stuff like that gave them some pretty substantial new capabilities, being able to like slide across the screen and things like that, or like I mentioned earlier, throw like a Hadouken or something like that along those lines. So it's a bit of an open world game. So you kind of like navigate the city like kind of screen by screen and kind of go wherever you want. I think there are like barriers that kind of keep you from going everywhere at all the time. So it is very much a game where you're just kind of like walking through left and right and just trying to get to whatever the goal is. And usually there's like a boss fight there. The bosses in this game are just kind of not super interesting. They all kind of are the same tactic of just like wait for them to attack and then go just like hit them kind of thing. I think this game lacks a lot of depth in general. Like as much as all the cool moves are, the diversity moves are throughout the game, and like there being some level of tension there with the money, I think the thing that like is a little frustrating, and maybe this is true for all of River City games and I just don't understand the appeal, is that like it feels like everything is just the same from moment 1 to moment 20 hours in kind of thing, right? And so I just don't really feel like there's a lot of difference of like what's going on. I don't think exploring the world's like that exciting. This is very like, I think it's like a parody game on like what's going on in the original River City games. So I don't necessarily know what's happening and like who all these characters are. It was kind of hard to follow like exactly what the lore is here. I understand there's like a lot of characters who are relevant to the past games. They'll be like, oh, this character again kind of thing, right? But it just felt like that there wasn't a lot of like depth here. I mean, I think this is a game probably made for River City fans kind of thing, right? So I don't think it's necessarily a game that's like trying to tell a very deep narrative. It's just giving you an excuse to go through and punch a bunch of people kind of thing. And I think there's like some satisfaction to the level up system. Cause like one of the things that's like kind of cool about the level up system, when it comes to like leveling your stats, is that like, not only do you need to level up, but you also have to eat food. And so you don't know what food gives you what stat boosts to like power up your character. And so you kind of like go and you'll just like go into a shop and you all just like take turns like eating the different foods to see like what it does. It'd be nice if it like kept track of like what the food was. So next time you're like going back in the shop, you're like, which one gave me strength again? I don't remember, because that's like the one stat I still need. And then you waste your money on something that doesn't give you strength kind of thing. It would have been nice if it like kept track of that stuff. But I do think it's like kind of fun to like have a question of like, I'm going to eat this meat stick and like, what am I going to get out of it? Right? Like I've never eaten a meat stick before. What's it going to taste like in terms of stats? I think it's like a cute little concept in general that I think it's like pretty cool. But yeah, I think overall it's just like a pretty repetitive game. I would not say I loved it. But I think when it comes to mindless multiplayer fun, I think it's a very reasonable way to like sit down and just like play some games with some friends and don't think too much about it. It is very much, I think, the multiplayer game of on its own. I don't think this would like stand out too much on its own. That being said, it still looks like all the other River City Ransom and Kunio-kun games there are, which I think a lot of those are still single player. So I may be missing something there. So if you are a Kunio-kun or River City fan, let me know like what you think is like interesting in these games, because I just don't know. I never really got into them. I played like the Scott Pilgrim game as well at one point. I just couldn't get into it either. It just like feels like the gameplay is just really simple, and like even though you upgrade your character, a lot of it doesn't really feel like it matters in my opinion. So I think that's kind of where I'm at with this game. But again, I think like fun 4-player silliness if you want that. So anyways, thanks for listening. How long was that? How long has the show been? An hour? I think that's pretty reasonable. 1 hour Ben time. 1 hour Ben a month. Doctor recommended. Yeah. I wasn't sure how like the sexual like the sexual, what was it? What did I call that section? Sexual influence games. I wasn't sure how that was gonna play out. But I think I'm actually pretty generally happy with what I said. I think anytime you bring up sexual stuff, it's so hard. It's so hard to talk about that stuff because it is very easy to get like somebody upset for reasons I do not blame them. Right. Like one of the things, oh my God, we're going right back into this. I'm going to try to wrap this up really quick. One of the things that bothers me, and this shouldn't bother you, but it bothers me. And I'm just telling you this not because I think you should change anything about you or anything like that, or that like people are wrong in this situation. But like, I don't like seeing erotic art of VTubers. And I know they lean into it. So like, this is not like, it's none of my business, right? At the end of the day, it's none of my business, but it feels like very exploitative of people in a way that I don't like, where I think with characters, I don't feel that way as much. But VTubers to me are people first, and the character second. So it's like, sometimes like stuff like that, like bothers me. And so like, in saying that, the reason I mention this is like, I don't think that like that should bother you if that's what you're into. I have a group of friends who are very much into, sharing a lot of that kind of like horny art kind of stuff. And it's fascinating to watch on my side. And I think part of why I enjoy sitting in there is because it's just like, it's a type of conversation that I almost never participate in. So it's fascinating to see like how people use sexual content to like socially relate to each other at times and things like that. But in the case of the stuff I talked about today, those are all things that I think I'm just like very mechanically minded on, of like, what does this add to this video game? I'm not really interested in like what this does for sexual reasons. Maybe someday that's like something that I'll be able to figure out, like what is the way to talk about that. But today, wonkshort.com is the website. Fox 11 video, working on that. Thank you again, Demidori, for supporting me and helping donate to that. And then once we're at the, I think we're halfway there, but once we're at the maximum, I'll take a work day off to work on that video, assuming that's still the situation I'm in by the time that happens. And yeah, we'll get that done hopefully. But check out the upcoming Hot Pot Gaming with Lucas Eggins of the Game On magazine here in Las Vegas. If you're interested in checking that out, go check that out next time. Otherwise, I'll see you next month. Bye. Oh, and welcome to Pia Carrot Podcast. That will be soon as well. Bye.